Hello, welcome to Untold Travel Stories. Today, I'm going to take you on a journey across the world, from one end of the earth to the other, told in a way you've never heard before. Dim the lights in your room, lean back, and let the sound of this video carry you. I arrived on a coast I did not recognize. The air was grey, not the grey of rain, the grey of mist. A thick, soft, low mist that hung over everything like a blanket that had been pulled down to the chin of the city. I was standing on a cliff. Below me, far below, waves were breaking against dark rocks. The sound rose up to me, not loud, not gentle, just constant. The sound of an ocean that had been hitting this coast since before there were ears to hear it. The Pacific. I had seen the Pacific before, on the coast of Japan, at the end of my first journey. But that had been a different Pacific. That had been a Pacific of silence and fog and ending. This Pacific was different. This Pacific was wild, alive. The waves were large and restless. The water was dark, almost black in places, then suddenly green where the sunlight broke through the mist. I turned around. Behind me, a city, a large city, sprawling across a flat plain between the ocean and the mountains. Low buildings in some parts, tall buildings in others, and everywhere, that grey mist softening the edges of everything, making the city look like a watercolor that had not quite dried. Lima. I walked into the city from the cliffs. The first neighborhood I entered was old, colonial. The buildings were grand but faded. Wooden balconies, carved and painted, hung over the narrow streets. The paint had once been blue, green, yellow. Now it was the ghost of blue, the ghost of green, the ghost of yellow, but the balconies were still beautiful. Because fading in architecture is not the same as dying. Fading is a kind of aging. And aging, when it happens with grace, is its own kind of beauty. I walked through a large plaza, a cathedral on one side, a government palace on the other, stone fountains in the center, dry now, their basins cracked. Pigeons, yes, pigeons again, sitting on the rim of the fountains, looking at me with the same calm indifference that pigeons had shown me in every city on every continent. Pigeons, I had decided long ago, were the true survivors, not because they were strong, because they expected nothing, and a creature that expects nothing is never disappointed. I entered the cathedral. It was dark inside, cool. The ceiling was high. The walls were covered in gold leaf, not the mosaic gold of Venice, not the thick gold of Oaxaca, but a delicate, ornamental gold. Gold that had been brought here from the mountains centuries ago, by hands that had been forced to dig it from the earth. I did not think about the history of that gold. Not today. Today I only looked at how it caught the thin light coming through the stained glass windows, how it glowed in the dimness, how it turned the inside of the cathedral into a cave of soft fire. I sat in a pew. I did not pray. I just sat, and I noticed something I had not noticed in any other church on this journey. Music. Not real music. Not a piano. Not a recording. The wind, coming through the high windows, passing through the pipes of the organ at the back of the cathedral, making a sound, very low, very deep, almost below the range of hearing. A single note, held, sustained, by nothing but wind passing through metal pipes. The cathedral was playing itself. I closed my eyes, I listened, and for a long time that one low note was the only sound in the world. I spent 2 days in Lima. I walked through neighborhoods rich and poor. I walked through parks where the jacaranda trees were blooming purple, the same purple I had seen in Mexico City. The same purple that followed me across continents like a color that had chosen me. I walked along the waterfront, the Malecon, a long path on top of the cliffs overlooking the Pacific. I stood at the railing and watched the sea, and I thought about how the Pacific is the largest thing on Earth, larger than all the land combined, and it was still here, still moving, still carrying its waves from one shore to another. The world had not lost its largest thing. The world had only lost its smallest thing, us. In a small cafe near the waterfront, I found a bag of coffee beans, Peruvian coffee, dark, roasted. I smelled the beans, rich, deep, with a sweetness underneath that reminded me of the chocolate I had tasted once, somewhere, in some life I could not place. I found a hand grinder in the cafe, an old one, manual. I ground the beans, I boiled water over a small fire, I poured the water over the grounds through a cloth filter. The coffee dripped into a ceramic cup, dark brown, almost black, steaming. I drank it, and the taste was like waking up inside a dream. Bitter and sweet and dark and warm and alive. More alive than anything I had tasted in weeks. Coffee. Another ritual. Another civilization's way of saying, slow down, sit, taste this, be here. I drank 2 cups, then a third. That night, I took out my notebook. I wrote Lima, a city in the mist. A cathedral that plays itself in the wind. Coffee that tastes like the earth, remembering that it is alive. I have noticed something on this journey. Every country I visit teaches me a different way of being still. India taught me to sit by a river. Pakistan taught me to sit in a mosque. Mexico taught me to lie in a hammock. Egypt taught me to float in salt water. And Peru is teaching me to stand on a cliff and watch the ocean and understand that the largest thing in the world is still here, still moving, still unbroken. I closed the notebook. Tomorrow I would head south, into the desert, toward lines drawn in the earth that no one was meant to see from the ground. The road south from Lima followed the coast. On my left, the Pacific, grey and restless. On my right, the desert, brown and still. Between them, a narrow strip of road, and me. I walked for many days. The landscape did not change. Ocean, desert, road, the same 3 things repeated kilometer after kilometer, as if the world had run out of ideas and was just repeating itself. But repetition, I had learned, is not the same as emptiness. Repetition is the world's way of insisting, of saying the same thing, again and again, until you finally hear it. The desert here was different from the Sahara, different from the Yucatan, different from the western desert of Egypt. This desert was flat, absolutely flat. A plain of brown gravel stretching inland as far as I could see. No dunes, no hills, no features of any kind, just flatness. And on this flatness lines, I did not see them at first. From the ground, they looked like nothing. Shallow grooves in the gravel, barely visible, the kind of thing you would step over without noticing. But I had heard of the Nazca lines from somewhere, from some book or some conversation in some other life. I knew what they were. I knew that from high above, from a plain, from a mountaintop, from the sky itself, these shallow grooves formed shapes, enormous shapes. Animals, birds, spiders, monkeys, whales, geometric patterns, lines running perfectly straight for kilometers across the desert floor, made 2,000 years ago by people who could never see what they were making, because the shapes could only be seen from above, and 2,000 years ago, no one could fly. I stood on the desert floor. I looked at the grooves at my feet. A line running straight, perfectly straight. Into the distance, I could not see where it ended. I followed the line. I walked along it. For maybe an hour, the line did not curve, did not waver. It ran straight as a drawn line on paper, across the desert, through the gravel, without any deviation. How had they done this? Without satellite images, without drones, without planes, without any way of seeing what they were drawing. They had done it on faith, on belief, on the conviction that something worth making does not need to be seen by the maker, that the audience is not always the artist, that sometimes you make something for the sky, for the gods, for whoever is looking down. I left the line. I walked further into the desert. I found another groove. This one curved. I followed it. It curved and curved and curved. I could not tell what shape I was walking. I was inside the shape, too close to see it, and this, I realized, was the deepest lesson of the Nazca lines. You cannot see the shape of your own life while you are living it. You are too close. You are inside the line. You are walking the groove. The curves and the straight stretches and the turns, they make sense only from above, only from a distance, only from after, and maybe that was okay. Maybe the shape did not need to be seen by the one who was making it. Maybe the making was enough. Maybe walking the line, faithfully, carefully, one step at a time, was the whole point. I climbed a small hill at the edge of the desert plain, not high enough to see the shapes properly, but high enough to see something. From this height, I could see the faintest outline of a figure below me. A bird, maybe, with wide wings, spread across the desert floor, each wing hundreds of meters long, a bird that could only be seen from the sky, a bird drawn in the earth by people who would never see it fly. I sat on the hill, I looked at the bird, and I felt a kinship with those ancient artists, because I, too, was making something I could not see, this journey, this walking, this long, slow line I was drawing across the surface of the earth, maybe from above. From wherever above is my journey made a shape. Maybe it was a bird too, or a spiral, or a straight line that ran without wavering from Istanbul to here. I would never know, but the shape was being made, one step at a time, one country at a time, one silence at a time. That night, I slept on the desert floor, on the gravel, under the stars. The stars in the Nazca desert were bright, very bright, and I thought about the ancient Nazcans lying on this same ground, looking up at these same stars, and thinking about the shapes they were drawing in the earth below, the shapes on the ground, the shapes in the sky, mirroring each other, the earth and the sky in conversation, and the people, small, brief, mortal, caught in between, making lines, drawing birds, hoping that someone, someday, would look down and understand. I took the watch from my pocket. I opened it. I will come back to you. M. The ticking was there, faint, the way it always was now, slower than it had been at the beginning, but still there. We are in Peru, I said to the watch, standing on lines that were drawn for the sky. I think M would have understood this place, because M was also drawing a line I am still following, even though I cannot see where it goes. The watch ticked. Once, twice. I closed it, I put it back, and I slept. I want to pause here for just a moment. If this journey is reaching you tonight, if you are walking beside me in the dark, please consider subscribing to this channel and leaving a like on this video. You do not have to say anything, just the click is enough. It tells me you are there, and knowing you are there is why I keep walking. Thank you. Now let us go higher, into the mountains, into the clouds. The road from the coast to the mountains was the steepest road I had ever walked. Not steep like the hills of Serbia, not steep like the foothills of the Himalayas. This was a different kind of steep. This was the earth itself tilting upward, dramatically, urgently, as if the land had decided, at some ancient moment, to stand up. The desert fell away behind me. The brown flatness of Nazca became a memory, and in front of me, rising like a wall, the Andes. I climbed for days. The air thinned with every hour. At first I did not notice. Then I noticed. My breath came shorter. My heart beat faster. My legs, which had carried me across continents without complaint, began to protest. This was altitude. I knew the word. I knew what it meant. The higher you go, the less oxygen the air carries. The less oxygen, the harder everything becomes. Walking, thinking, sleeping, even dreaming becomes harder at altitude because the brain, starved of oxygen, does not fully rest. But I kept climbing because Cusco was up there, somewhere above the clouds, and I needed to reach it. The landscape changed as I climbed. The desert became scrubland. The scrubland became grassland. The grassland became something I had no name for, a high, cold, wind-swept plateau covered in golden grass that moved in waves, like a sea made of earth. The Altiplano. I walked across it. The wind was constant, cold, thin, cutting through my clothes, through my blanket, through everything I had wrapped around myself. And the sky at this altitude was not the same sky I had known below. It was darker. Even during the day, a deeper blue, almost purple, as if the sky were thinner here too, and the blackness of space was showing through. I saw animals, llamas, small herds of them standing on the hillsides chewing grass, looking at me with their enormous dark eyes. Their wool was long and tangled. They had been wild for years now, no one to share them, no one to lead them, no one to tie colorful tassels to their ears, as the people of these mountains had once done. But they were alive, calm, unbothered by my presence. I stopped near one herd. A young llama, smaller than the others, lighter in color, walked toward me. Not quickly, not slowly, just curiously, the way a child walks toward a stranger who seems harmless. It stopped about 2 meters from me. It looked at me. I looked at it. Its eyes were the darkest eyes I had ever seen. Dark as the water at the bottom of a cenote. Dark as the inside of a tomb in the Valley of the Kings, but not empty. Full of something I could not name, something ancient and patient, and entirely without fear. "Hello," I said. The llama blinked. Then it turned and walked back to its herd. That was enough. I reached Cusco on a morning when the sun was so bright it hurt. The city sat in a valley between mountains, high mountains, snow-capped. The kind of mountains that make you feel that you are standing at the bottom of a bowl, and the mountains are the rim, and the sky is the lid. Cusco was old, very old, older than the colonial buildings that lined its streets, older than the churches that had been built on top of temples, older than the language on the faded signs, because beneath the colonial city, beneath the plaster and the paint and the Spanish architecture, there was another city, an Inca city, built of stones so perfectly fitted that, after 500 years, you still could not slide a piece of paper between them. I walked through the narrow streets. The lower parts of many buildings were Inca stonework, dark grey stone, cut with impossible precision, each stone a different shape, but fitting perfectly against its neighbors, like a puzzle made by gods. The upper parts of the buildings were Spanish colonial, plaster, paint, wooden balconies, a different kind of beauty, a different kind of craft, 2 civilizations stacked on top of each other, one holding up the other, one invisible, one visible. I ran my hand along the Inca stones. They were cold, smooth, perfectly smooth where the surfaces met, as if the stones had been polished by hand until they fit against each other like skin against skin. I came to a wall, a famous wall. I knew it from somewhere, a wall with a stone that had 12 angles, 12 sides. Each side cut to fit perfectly against the stones around it. No mortar, no cement, just stone against stone, held together by precision and gravity and the patience of the hands that had shaped it. I stood in front of the 12-angled stone for a long time, and I thought about what it meant to cut a stone with 12 angles, to take a raw piece of rock and to shape it by hand, with bronze tools, into something with 12 perfectly flat surfaces, each at a different angle, each meeting its neighbor without a gap. It meant care. It meant time. It meant a kind of love that most people would not associate with stonework. But it was love. What else do you call it when someone spends weeks, maybe months, shaping a single stone so that it will fit perfectly into a wall that is meant to last forever? Love. That was the only word. I walked to the main plaza. The Plaza de Armas. Large, open, a cathedral on one side, a Jesuit church on another, arcades with shops along the other 2 sides. In the center of the plaza, a fountain with a small golden figure on top. An Inca figure, I think. Or maybe a Spanish figure dressed as an Inca. The layers of history in this city made it hard to tell who was who. I sat on the edge of the fountain. The sun was warm. The air was thin but clear. And I listened to the silence of Cusco. It was a layered silence. Like the city itself, the Inca silence was underneath. Deep, stone, patient. The colonial silence was on top, lighter, more fragile, made of plaster and wood. And between the 2 silences, in the space where the 2 civilizations met, there was a third silence. The silence of what had happened between them. The conquest, the destruction, the building on top of the ruins. I did not judge this silence. I only listened to it, because silence, even when it holds pain, deserves to be heard. I explored Cusco for 3 days. I walked through the old Inca district. I found walls where the stones were so perfectly fitted that the walls looked like they had grown from the earth rather than been built upon it. I walked through churches where the altars were covered in gold and silver, and the paintings on the walls showed Christian saints with the faces of Andean people, and the Virgin Mary wore a dress shaped like a mountain, because the people who had painted her had seen the divine not in the sky but in the earth. I walked through markets where the stalls were still full of things: woven textiles, bright reds, deep blues, earthy browns, pottery painted with geometric patterns, small figurines of llamas carved from stone. In one stall I found a woven blanket, small, the size of a scarf almost, but the weaving was extraordinarily fine, tight, perfect. The pattern was a series of interlocking diamonds in red and black and cream. I picked it up. I held it in my hands. The weaver who had made this had spent days on it, maybe weeks. Each thread placed deliberately, each color chosen, each diamond a small act of precision and care. I folded the blanket carefully. I put it in my bag. It was small enough to carry and beautiful enough to keep. On my last night in Cusco, I climbed to the ruins of Sacsayhuaman, the great Inca fortress above the city, massive stone walls, zigzagging across the hillside. The stones here were the largest I had ever seen used in construction. Some of them weighed over 100 tons, and yet they had been moved, shaped, and fitted together, without wheels, without iron tools, without any of the technologies that the rest of the world had used. I sat on top of one of the great stones. I looked down at Cusco. The city was spread below me. Red rooftops, church towers. The plaza in the center, like a small bright square in a puzzle of narrow streets. The sun was setting behind the mountains to the west. The light turned gold, then orange, then the deep, rich red that I had come to associate with the end of another day in another country. In this long, strange, beautiful journey, I took out the watch. I opened it. I will come back to you. The ticking was very slow now, very faint. I had to press the watch hard against my ear to hear it. Tomorrow, I said to the watch. Tomorrow we go higher, to the place above the clouds. The watch ticked once. I waited for the second tick. It came, after a long pause. I closed the watch. I put it back. Tomorrow, Machu Picchu. I left Cusco before dawn. The road went north and west, through valleys, along rivers. The rivers here were fast and white. Glacier water, mountain water, water that had never been still in its entire existence. I followed one of these rivers for 2 days. The valley narrowed. The mountains on either side grew taller. The vegetation grew thicker. The air grew warmer, wetter, as I descended from the high plateau into the cloud forest. The cloud forest. I had never been in a cloud forest before. It was not like any forest I had known. It was a forest that lived inside a cloud. The mist was constant, not thick enough to blind you, but thick enough to soften everything, to blur the edges of the trees, to make the path ahead look like a path into a dream. The trees were covered in moss. Every surface, every trunk, every branch, every rock, every fallen log was covered in a thick green fur of moss and fern and small orchids. The forest was wet, not from rain, from the cloud itself. The cloud condensed on every surface, and the water dripped down, and the moss drank it, and the ferns grew from it, and the orchids bloomed in it. It was the most alive place I had ever been. I walked through the cloud forest for a full day. The path was old, Inca, made of flat stones, laid carefully, forming a staircase that climbed and descended through the forest. The Inca had built roads across their entire empire. Roads that climbed over mountains that would stop a modern highway. Roads that crossed rivers on suspension bridges made of woven grass. Roads that connected a civilization spread across the most difficult terrain on Earth. And this was one of those roads. Still here, still walkable, still carrying a traveler from one place to another, 500 years after the civilization that had built it was gone. I climbed a final staircase, steep, my legs burning, my lungs struggling in the thin air, and then the staircase ended, and I came out onto a terrace and I saw it. Machu Picchu below me, spread across a narrow ridge between two green peaks, a city of stone, terraces stepping down the mountainside, temples, houses, plazas, staircases connecting level to level, all of it made of the same grey stone, all of it fitting together with the same impossible precision I had seen in Cusco. And around it, on every side, mountains, green mountains, rising into clouds, disappearing into mist, reappearing, disappearing again. The city floated. That was the only word. It floated between earth and sky, between cloud and stone, between the visible and the invisible. I sat on the terrace. I did not move. I had seen many things on this journey, many beautiful things, many astonishing things, but Machu Picchu was different. Machu Picchu was not beautiful the way a painting is beautiful. Machu Picchu was beautiful the way a truth is beautiful, the way a mathematical equation is beautiful, the way the first breath of a newborn child is beautiful. It was beautiful because it was exactly right, because it belonged exactly where it was, because the mountains and the stones and the clouds and the terraces all fit together as if they had been designed by a single mind that understood everything about the relationship between the earth and the sky. And maybe they had been, and maybe that mind was not a human mind. Maybe it was the mind of the mountain itself, and the Inca had only listened and built what the mountain told them to build. I descended into the city. I walked through the narrow streets. The stones under my feet were perfectly flat, perfectly fitted. The walls on either side were low, waist-high mostly, because the views were too important to be blocked by walls. Everywhere I turned, there was a view. Of a peak, of a valley, of a cloud drifting past at eye level, of a terrace stepping down into green mist. The city had been designed for seeing. Every building was oriented toward something, toward a mountain peak, toward the sunrise, toward the point where the river, far below, curved around the base of the ridge. The Inca had not just built a city, they had built a way of looking at the world. I came to the Temple of the Sun, a curved wall of stone, perfectly curved, following the shape of the natural rock beneath it, in the wall a window. And the window was placed so that, on the morning of the winter solstice, the first light of the sun would enter through it and fall on a particular stone inside the temple, like Abu Simbel, like the pyramids, like every ancient civilization that had understood that the relationship between light and stone was sacred. I stood inside the temple. I looked through the window. I could not see the sun. It was not the solstice. The light came through the window at the wrong angle, falling on the wrong stone, but I imagined it, the correct morning, the correct angle. The beam of golden light entering through this window, crossing this room, touching this stone, for just a few minutes, just once a year, and the people gathered outside, waiting, watching, holding their breath. The light touches the stone. The year begins again. I spent 2 days in Machu Picchu. I sat in every part of the city. I touched every wall I could reach. I climbed every staircase. I looked through every window, and I discovered something. The city was not silent, not in the way other empty places were silent. The wind, moving through the stone buildings, through the windows, through the narrow passages, made sounds. Different sounds in different places. A low whistle here, a soft hum there, a sound almost like breathing in a corridor between two walls. The city was an instrument, like the cathedral in Lima, which had played itself in the wind, but more complex, more deliberate. As if the Inca architects had known that the wind would come and had shaped the stones to receive it and had designed the city so that when the wind blew, the city would sing. Not a song with words, not a melody you could hum. A sound older than melody, the sound of air and stone in conversation, the sound of the mountain itself, speaking through the buildings that had been placed upon its shoulders. On my last evening I climbed to the highest point of the ruins, a carved stone called the Intihuatana, the hitching post of the sun, a stone pillar carved from the living rock, rising from a flat platform at the very top of the city. The Inca had believed that this stone was connected to the sun, that it held the sun in place, that without it the sun might wander off and never return. I placed my hand on the stone. It was warm. warmer than the air, as if there was still, after all these centuries, a small fire burning inside it. I closed my eyes. I felt the warmth of the stone against my palm, and I imagined that I could feel the sun far above me, connected to this stone by an invisible thread, the stone holding the sun warming the stone, each one keeping the other in place. I sat beside the Intihuatana as the sun set. The clouds below me turned pink, then gold, then deep purple. Then they disappeared entirely, and the city was floating above nothing, above pure darkness, with only the stars above and the silence below. I took out my notebook. I wrote, Machu Picchu. A city that sings in the wind, a stone that holds the sun. A people who understood that building is not about conquering the earth. Building is about listening to the earth and placing your stones where the earth tells you to place them. I have walked through many ruins on this journey, but Machu Picchu is not a ruin. Machu Picchu is a conversation between stone and sky, between earth and sun, between what was and what still is. The conversation has not ended. The stones are still speaking, the wind is still carrying their words, and I am just one more listener in a long line of listeners standing on this ridge, hearing what the mountain has to say. I closed the notebook. The stars came out, one by one, like the small lights of a city that exists only at night, only above the clouds. I lay on my back on the stone platform beside the Intihuatana, and I listened to Machu Picchu singing in the dark. I came down from Machu Picchu slowly. The cloud forest received me again. The mist wrapped around me. The moss-covered trees watched me pass. And then, after 2 days of walking, the forest thinned, the air cooled, the sky opened up. I was back on the Altiplano, the high plateau, the roof of South America. I walked southeast for many days, across grassland so wide it made the steppe of Central Asia look intimate. The grass here was golden, short, tough. It moved in the wind like the fur of a sleeping animal. The sky was enormous. I have said this before about other skies in other countries, but the sky of the Altiplano was the largest I had ever been under, because there was nothing between me and the sky. No trees, no buildings, no mountains close enough to block the view, just grass and sky, and the thin blue line where they met. I walked inside this enormous space, and I felt not small exactly, but transparent, as if the sky could see through me, as if I were made of glass and the light was passing through me without stopping. On the 4th day, I saw something ahead, a darkness on the horizon, not a mountain, not a city, something flat, something that reflected the sky, water, a lake, a vast lake, so large that I could not see the far shore, Titicaca, the highest navigable lake in the world. That was a fact I knew from somewhere. Nearly 4,000 meters above sea level, a lake so high that the air above it was thin enough to make your head spin. I walked to its shore. I stood at the edge. The water was dark blue, almost black, but when the sun came through the clouds and hit the surface, the lake turned into a mirror, a perfect mirror, reflecting the sky so exactly that you could not tell where the water ended and the sky began. I had seen many bodies of water on this journey, the Ganges, the Nile, the Mediterranean, the Caribbean, the Pacific. But Titicaca was different from all of them, because Titicaca was still, not still the way a pond is still the way a held breath is still. The lake was not moving, not a wave, not a ripple, not a tremor. The surface was as flat and as smooth as a sheet of polished glass, and in that glass the entire sky was captured, every cloud, every color, every shade of blue. I was looking down at the sky. I sat on a rock at the edge of the lake. I took off my shoes. I let my feet hang over the water. The water was cold, very cold, the kind of cold that comes from depth and altitude and thousands of years of solitude. I did not put my feet in. Not yet. I just let them hang above the surface. Close enough to feel the cold rising from the water, close enough to see my own reflection, a dark shape, upside down, hanging from the sky. There were islands in the lake. I could see them from the shore. small islands, some of them close, some of them far. Some of them were made of stone. Others, and this was the strange part, were made of reeds. Floating islands made of woven totora reeds, built by the Uros people who had lived on these islands for centuries. They had woven the reeds together, layer upon layer, creating platforms thick enough to walk on, to build houses on, to live entire lives on. The islands were still there, still floating. The reeds had not been maintained for years, and some of the islands had begun to sink at the edges, but the centers were still above water, still holding. I found a small reed boat at the shore, a traditional boat made of bundled totora reeds, tied together and curved upward at both ends like a crescent moon. I pushed the boat into the water. I climbed in. I picked up the wooden paddle that lay inside, and I paddled out onto the lake. The silence on the lake was the deepest silence I had ever heard. Deeper than the silence inside the pyramid at Giza, deeper than the silence in the cave in Iceland, deeper than the silence of the tiger. Because this silence was not enclosed, it was open. It stretched in every direction, across the entire surface of the lake, all the way to the far shore, which I could not see. An open silence, a silence without walls, a silence that had nothing to bounce off of. The only sound was the small splash of my paddle entering the water, and even that sound was absorbed instantly, swallowed by the lake, taken into the depth and held there. I paddled to one of the floating islands. I climbed out of the boat. I stepped onto the reeds. The island moved beneath my feet, not much. A gentle sway, like stepping onto a very thick mattress. The reeds were dry on top, but when I pressed my foot down, I could feel the water underneath, inches below the surface. The island was floating on water the way a leaf floats, the way a prayer floats. Barely. Gently. With just enough buoyancy to stay above. There was a small reed house on the island. One room. The walls were woven reeds. The roof was woven reeds. Inside, a reed mat on the floor. A few clay pots. A small stone hearth. I went inside. I sat on the mat, and I felt the island swaying. Very gently. Very slowly. The motion of the lake transmitted through the reeds, through the mat, into my body. The whole island was breathing, rising and falling with the smallest movements of the water, alive, responsive, connected to the lake the way a floating leaf is connected to the pond. I stayed on the island for a long time. I lay on the reed mat. I closed my eyes. I let the island rock me, and I thought about the people who had built this island, who had woven it, reed by reed, the way the weaver in San Cristobal had woven cloth, thread by thread, who had chosen to live not on solid ground but on water, not on permanence but on motion, not on certainty but on trust, trust that the reeds would hold, trust that the water would carry, trust that the island would float. That kind of trust, the trust of building your home on water, was the bravest thing I could imagine. I paddled to the shore as the sun began to set. The sunset on Lake Titicaca was not like any other sunset I had seen, because the lake was a mirror and the sunset was happening twice, once in the sky, once in the water, the same colors, the same light, the same slow fading from gold to orange to red to purple, two sunsets, one above, one below, and me in a reed boat floating between them. I put the paddle down. I let the boat drift. I sat in the center of the crescent-shaped vessel and I watched both sunsets at the same time. The stars came out, and they too were doubled, stars above, stars below. As if the universe had folded in half and I was sitting on the crease, I took the watch from my pocket. I opened it. I will come back to you. M. I held the watch up, so it could see the doubled sky. Two skies, I said, two sets of stars. Maybe there are two M's too. One above, one below. One in the world I remember, one in the world I have forgotten. The watch ticked once. A long, long pause. I waited. No second tick came. I pressed the watch harder against my ear. And then, faintly, very faintly, the second tick arrived. As if it had been traveling a great distance to reach me, I closed the watch. I paddled back to shore that night. I slept on the shore of the lake, on the cold grass of the Altiplano, with the doubled stars above me and the sound of absolute nothing in my ears. And I dreamed of floating, not on water, on silence, on the vast, open, endless silence of a lake at the top of the world. In the dream, I was not moving. I was not going anywhere. I was just floating, and that was enough. I left Lake Titicaca heading north and east. The Altiplano continued for a while. Then, gradually, the land began to change. The golden grass gave way to greener grass. The green grass gave way to shrubs. The shrubs gave way to small trees. The small trees gave way to larger trees, and the air changed. It became warmer, wetter, heavier. With each step downward from the high plateau, the air thickened, like descending into a warm bath, like entering a room where someone has been breathing for a very long time. I was descending from the Andes into the Amazon basin. The transition was not sudden, it happened over days. The mountains behind me grew smaller in the rear view of my mind. The trees around me grew taller, thicker, closer together. The sounds changed from the wind sounds of the Altiplano to the insect sounds of the lowlands. Buzzing, clicking, humming. A constant chorus of small living things announcing their existence. And then, one morning, the trees closed over the path completely. The sky disappeared, and I was inside the forest. The Amazon, or the edge of the Amazon, the beginning of it, the place where the Andes hand off their rivers to the flatlands, and the rivers widen and slow and begin their long journey east, toward the Atlantic. I had been in forests before, the taiga of Siberia, the cloud forest of Peru, the jungles of Chiapas, but this forest was different. This forest was not a place. This forest was a being. Everything was alive. Every surface, every layer. The ground was alive, covered in fallen leaves and rotting wood and fungi of every color, breaking down the dead and turning it back into the living. The trunks were alive, covered in moss and lichens and small plants that grew on the bark without ever touching the soil. The canopy was alive, a green ceiling, 30 meters above my head, so thick that the light that reached the forest floor was green. Not golden, not white, green, filtered through a million leaves, and between the ground and the canopy, layers, layer upon layer of life, vines hanging like ropes, orchids blooming in the crooks of branches, bromeliads holding small pools of water in their cupped leaves, insects everywhere, ants in long columns, beetles with shells the color of emeralds, butterflies, blue butterflies enormous, their wings as wide as my hand, drifting through the green light like pieces of fallen sky. I walked through the forest slowly, not because I was tired, because fast walking was wrong here. The forest did not want fast walking. The forest wanted attention. The forest wanted you to see, and there was so much to see. Every step revealed something new. A mushroom I had never imagined, bright orange growing from the side of a tree, shaped like a small shelf. A spider's web strung between two branches, so perfect, so geometrical that it looked like it had been made by a mathematician. A frog sitting on a leaf, the size of my thumbnail, colored blue and black in a pattern that said, "Do not touch me." I did not touch it. The sounds of the forest were overwhelming at first. Birds, so many birds, calling from every direction. Some of them high and sharp, some of them low and resonant, some of them sounding like laughter, some like weeping, some like the creaking of a door that has not been opened in a very long time. And underneath the birds, the insects, the constant hum. Not a single sound, but a tapestry of sounds. Hundreds of different species, each one producing its own note, and all of them together creating a chord, a living chord. A chord that never resolved, never reached a conclusion, just continued and continued and continued. This was the opposite of the silence I had been seeking for so long. And yet, and this surprised me, it was the same thing, because the sound of the forest was so complete, so total, so all-encompassing, that it became a kind of silence. a silence made of sound, the way white light is made of all colors, the way the ocean is made of all drops. The forest was not noisy, the forest was full, and fullness and silence are not opposites. They are the same thing, seen from different angles. I walked for 3 days through the edge of the Amazon. I followed a small river, clear water running over smooth stones. I drank from it, I bathed in it. The water was warm, not cold like the glacier rivers of the mountains, warm the way rain is warm after it has spent an afternoon falling through tropical air. Small fish darted away from my feet when I waded in. Silver flashes, gone before I could see what they were. On the second night, I made camp beside the river. I did not make a fire. The forest was too wet for fire, and too alive. A fire here would have been an intrusion, a violence. Instead, I sat in the darkness, complete darkness. The canopy blocked even the stars, and I listened. The night forest was louder than the day forest. The frogs started first, a deep, rhythmic croaking that seemed to come from everywhere at once. Then the insects rose, a higher pitch, layered on top of the frogs. Then something else, a sound I could not identify, a low, vibrating hum, like the forest itself was resonating, like the earth beneath me was producing a note too low for human ears, but my body could feel it in my bones, in my chest. I sat in this sound for hours, and I felt that the forest was breathing, not metaphorically, literally. The trees in the darkness were exchanging gases, breathing out oxygen, breathing in carbon dioxide. The whole forest was one enormous lung, and I was sitting inside it, breathing the breath the forest was giving me. The forest was keeping me alive. In that moment, sitting in the dark beside a river in the Amazon, I understood something very simple. I had never been alone, not once, not on any part of this journey. The air had always been given to me by trees. The water had always been given to me by rivers. The warmth had always been given to me by the sun. I had been held, sustained, kept alive by a world that did not know my name and did not care what my name was. A world that gave without asking, without conditions, without expecting anything in return. This was not loneliness. This was the deepest companionship there was. I took out my notebook. I could not see the page. I wrote in the dark, by feel, the pen moving across paper I could not see. The Amazon at night. I cannot see my own hand, but I can hear the forest breathing, and I can feel the breath entering my lungs. The forest does not know I am here. The forest does not care that I am here. And yet the forest is keeping me alive. This is what love looks like when it has no face, when it has no name, when it does not know it is love. It just is, it just gives, it just breathes. And the one who receives it does not need to say thank you, because the breathing itself is the thank you. The living itself is the gratitude. I left the Amazon on the 4th day. I climbed back up toward the mountains. The air thinned, the trees shrank, the sounds faded, and when I came out above the tree line and looked back down at the green carpet of the forest stretching to the horizon, I felt that I was leaving a part of myself behind. A part that had learned in the darkness beside a river that the world is not empty. The world has never been empty. The world is so full that we cannot see it all. We can only sit inside it and breathe and be grateful. I turned west, toward the next place, toward another kind of silence. I came to Arequipa from the east, through high desert, through passes where the wind cut like a blade, through valleys so narrow that the sky above was just a thin blue ribbon. And then the valley opened, and I saw the city, white. Arequipa was white, not the mist white of Lima, not the plaster white of Alexandria, a stone white, the white of a volcanic rock called Silla, light, porous, easy to carve, and so white that in the afternoon sun it glowed like something lit from within. The whole city was built of this stone, every building, every church, every wall, every archway, white. And behind the city, rising above it, dominating the sky, a volcano, El Misti, a perfect cone, snow-capped, its peak trailing a thin wisp of cloud, as if the mountain were smoking a slow cigarette and thinking about something. I walked into Arequipa through its southern edge. The streets were wide here, wider than Cusco, wider than any city I had seen in Peru, and the buildings were grand. Colonial mansions with thick sillar walls and carved doorways and iron balconies. The white stone caught the light in a way that made the city seem to glow from inside, as if the buildings were not reflecting the sun but producing their own light, a cool light, a patient light. I walked down the center of a wide avenue. My shadow stretched long in front of me, and behind my shadow, the shadow of the volcano, longer, wider, a shadow that covered half the city every afternoon. The people of Arequipa had lived their whole lives in the shadow of a volcano. They had built their houses from its stone. They had drunk the water that melted from its snow. They had watched its peak every morning to see if smoke was rising. And they had stayed, despite the danger, despite the knowledge that the mountain could wake up at any moment and erase everything. They had stayed because the mountain was beautiful, and because you cannot leave something you love just because it might destroy you. I came to the central plaza, the Plaza de Armas. It was the most beautiful plaza I had seen in Peru, maybe the most beautiful I had seen on any journey. On one side, a cathedral, enormous, made entirely of white sillar, 2 towers reaching toward the sky, a long colonnade across the front. The stone was carved with such care that even the smallest details, the leaves, the flowers, the faces of angels, were still sharp after centuries. On the other 3 sides, arcades, 2 stories of arched walkways, also in white sillar, with iron balconies on the upper level, and in the center of the plaza, a fountain, bronze, with a small figure on top, an angel, I think, or a trumpeter, green with age. I sat on a bench in the plaza, under one of the palm trees that lined the edges, and I looked at the volcano. El Misti was framed perfectly by the plaza, as if the city had been designed specifically to provide this view. Every street leading away from the plaza pointed toward the volcano. Every rooftop gave a view of its peak. The city was an offering to the mountain, a white city laid at the feet of a white volcano, saying, "We are yours. We are made of you. We will return to you one day. But for now, let us stand here. Let us glow in the light. Let us be beautiful." I explored Arequipa for 3 days. I walked through the Santa Catalina Monastery, a city within a city. A compound of small houses, narrow streets, tiny plazas, hidden fountains, all behind high walls. Nuns had lived here for centuries, in silence, in prayer, in the blue and orange and white rooms that were painted in colors so bold they seemed to be shouting against the quiet of the lives lived inside them. The rooms were small, a bed, a desk, a chair, a cross on the wall, a window that looked out onto a small courtyard where a single tree grew. I stood in one of these rooms. I imagined the nun who had lived here, a young woman maybe, sent by her family or choosing to come, closing the door behind her, knowing that this room, this small, painted, silent room, would be her world for the rest of her life, and finding, within that smallness, a kind of freedom. Because freedom is not about how much space you have. Freedom is about what you do with the space you are given. And a nun in a room the size of a closet who has chosen her silence, who has made peace with her walls, that nun is freer than a king in a palace who is afraid of every shadow. I found the monastery's kitchen, a large room with stone ovens and long wooden tables, copper pots hanging from hooks, clay bowls stacked on shelves, and on one shelf a small recipe book, handwritten in Spanish. The ink faded but still readable. I opened it, recipes, written in a careful hand, with measurements and instructions and small notes in the margins. Add more sugar if the oranges are sour. Do not let the chocolate burn. Sister Maria prefers less cinnamon. I held the recipe book in my hands for a long time. Sister Maria, a woman with a preference for less cinnamon, a woman who had lived inside these walls, who had eaten in this kitchen, who had been known at least by whoever wrote this book well enough that her preferences were recorded. Sister Maria preferred less cinnamon. That was all I would ever know about her, but it was enough. Because a preference is a personality. A preference is a self, To say less cinnamon is to say I'm here, I have opinions, I am not just a habit, I am a person. I put the recipe book back on the shelf, gently. The way you put down something precious. On my second evening in Arequipa, I climbed to the Yanahuara viewpoint, a small plaza on a hill above the city, with a row of stone arches, each one framing a different view of El Misti. I stood under one of the arches. The volcano was directly in front of me. Its peak was glowing pink in the last light of the day. The snow on its summit caught the sunset and held it for a few moments after the rest of the world had gone dark. I watched the glow fade, from pink to grey to silver to nothing, and I thought about what it meant to live beneath a volcano. It meant that every day was borrowed. Every sunrise was a gift that the mountain had chosen to give. Every house, every street, every carved stone angel on the cathedral, all of it existed only because the mountain allowed it. And this was not a terrible thing. This was a truthful thing, because all of life is borrowed. All of life is given by something larger than ourselves. We do not own our days. We do not earn our breaths. They are given, and they can be taken back at any moment. Without warning, the people of Arequipa had understood this. They had built their beautiful white city anyway, not despite the volcano, because of it. Because knowing that everything could end at any moment had made them determined to make every moment beautiful. That night, I slept in one of the nuns' cells in the Santa Catalina monastery on the narrow bed, under the cross on the wall, with the window open to the courtyard where the single tree rustled in the night breeze. I took the watch from my pocket. I held it to my ear. The ticking was barely there now, a whisper, a ghost of a rhythm. I had to hold my breath to hear it. We are under a volcano, I said to the watch, a mountain that could erase this city in an afternoon, and the city is the most beautiful city I have seen in this country. I think there is a lesson in that, but I am too tired to say what it is, so I will just hold you and listen to you tick, and trust that the mountain will let us sleep one more night. The watch ticked once. I did not wait for the second tick. I closed my eyes, and I slept. The mountain let us sleep. I left Arequipa heading northwest, back toward the coast, back toward the desert. The road descended from the mountains. The white city shrank behind me. The volcano grew smaller, then it was just a white triangle on the horizon. Then it was gone, and the desert returned. I had been in deserts before. Many deserts, the Sahara, the western desert of Egypt, the Nazca Plain, the stony flatlands of the Yucatan. But the desert of southern Peru was its own thing. Sand, real sand. Not the gravel of Nazca, not the flat stone of the Sahara. Sand that rose and fell in enormous dunes, golden dunes, some of them 100 meters high, shaped by the wind into curves so smooth they looked like they had been sculpted by a giant's hand. I walked among the dunes. It was hard walking. The sand gave way under my feet with every step, 2 steps forward, 1 step sliding back. The sun was fierce, the air was dry, my water was limited. But the dunes were beautiful in a way that made the difficulty seem small, because the dunes were always changing. The wind reshaped them constantly. A dune that was here today would be somewhere else tomorrow. The landscape was never the same twice. Every hour, every minute, the wind was erasing and rewriting the desert. Nothing was permanent here. Nothing was fixed. The desert was a page that was always being wiped clean and written on again. I walked for 2 days through the dunes, and on the afternoon of the second day, from the top of a very high dune, I looked down, and I saw something impossible. Water. Green water. Surrounded by palm trees. In the middle of the desert, in the middle of the dunes, a small pool of green water, reflecting the palm trees, reflecting the sky, reflecting the golden sand all around it. An oasis. Huacachina. I slid down the dune, half running, half falling. The sand cascading around me in small golden avalanches. I reached the bottom. The palm trees rose around me. Their shade fell over me like a cool hand placed on a hot forehead. I walked to the edge of the pool. I knelt down. The water was green. Not the turquoise of the cenotes, not the blue of Titicaca. Green. the color of the algae that grew in it, the color of life that had found a way to exist in the most unlikely place. I cupped water in my hands. I did not drink it. It was not drinking water, but I held it. I felt its coolness against my palms, and then I let it go back into the pool, back where it belonged. Around the pool, there were buildings, small hotels, restaurants, a few houses, all of them built to face the water, all of them now empty. But the buildings were not what interested me. What interested me was the oasis itself, the fact that it existed, the fact that here, in the middle of the most barren landscape I had walked through in Peru, water had found its way to the surface, had gathered, had attracted palm trees, had attracted algae, had attracted birds, small brown birds that darted between the palms, chattering to each other. Life had found a way. Life always finds a way. This was not a new lesson. I had learned it in Siwa. I had learned it in the Sahara. I had learned it every time I saw a flower growing through a crack in a stone. But here, in Huacachina, the lesson was so concentrated, so pure, so unmistakable, that it hit me with the force of something I was hearing for the very first time. Life finds a way. Not because life is strong, but because life is stubborn. Because life does not accept no for an answer. Because life, when it finds a crack, a gap, a tiny opening in the wall of impossibility, pushes through without knowing why, without needing a reason, just because pushing through is what life does. I sat under a palm tree at the edge of the oasis. The dunes rose around me on every side, golden walls encircling the green. The light was changing. The afternoon was moving toward evening, and the dunes, as the sun lowered, were changing color, from gold to amber to deep orange to the color of fire. And the pool, the small green pool, was reflecting all of it. The dunes, the palms, the sky, the fire. I was sitting inside a bowl of beauty. I stayed in Huacachina for 3 days. I did not walk much. I did not explore much. I mostly sat. I sat by the pool in the morning and watched the birds. I sat under the palms at midday and felt the shade. I sat on top of a dune in the evening and watched the desert turn colors I had no names for. And I thought about the journey, not this journey specifically, all of them, every country, every city, every river and mountain and desert and forest and shore. I had been walking for so long now, years maybe, I had lost count, and every place I had been had taught me something, a different lesson, a different silence, a different way of being. But all the lessons I realize now, sitting beside this small pool of green water in the middle of a golden desert, were the same lesson. The world is here. That was all the world is here. It is not gone. It is not broken. It is not over. The world is here, and it is beautiful, and it does not need us to be beautiful, but it lets us see its beauty anyway, and that letting, that generosity, that openness, is the most extraordinary thing about existence. On my last evening in Huacachina, I climbed to the top of the highest dune. The sun was setting. The whole desert was on fire. The dunes were rivers of gold and red and purple. The sky was a canvas that some painter had gone mad on, using every warm color that exists. And the oasis below me, the small green pool, the palm trees, the empty buildings, was a jewel in the center of the fire, a small green living jewel. I took the watch from my pocket. The last time, I knew it was the last time. I opened the cover. "I will come back to you, M." I held the watch to my ear. Silence. I waited. Silence. I pressed the watch harder. I held my breath. I listened with everything I had. And there, at the very edge of hearing, at the very bottom of sound, one tick. Just one. The last tick. And then silence. Real silence. Final silence. The watch was done. The small heart that had been beating inside it for years, for continents, for my entire walking life, had stopped. I held the watch in my open palm. I looked at it in the last light of the sunset. It was just an object now, silver, old, beautiful, with words inside that I had read 1,000 times, but it was no longer alive. I did not feel sad. I felt grateful. grateful that the watch had lasted this long, grateful that it had kept ticking through cities and deserts and forests and mountains, grateful that it had given me a rhythm to walk to, a question to carry, a mystery to hold. I will come back to you. I had come back. Not to not to a person, not to a place. I had come back to myself. Whoever that was, wherever that was, I was here, on a dune, in a desert, beside an oasis. At sunset, with a stopped watch in my hand and the whole quiet world spread out before me. I was here, and being here was enough. I placed the watch on the sand, at the very top of the dune, open, facing the sky. The wind would cover it, eventually. The sand would bury it, in a day, a week, a year. The dune would shift and the watch would disappear beneath the golden surface. And one day, maybe, the dune would shift again, and the watch would appear, and someone, some future traveler, some wanderer of the desert would find it, would pick it up, would open it, would read the words inside, and they would wonder who was, and the wondering would be a gift. I climbed down from the dune. I walked back to the oasis. I sat under my palm tree one more time. The stars came out. One by one, the same stars. Always the same stars. I took the tesbih from my pocket, the wooden beads, the oldest thing I still carried, from Cappadocia. From the beginning, I passed the beads through my fingers. 1, 2, 3, the rhythm, the pulse. Still here, always here, not from a watch, not from a clock, not from any mechanism, from my own fingers, from my own breath. From the heartbeat that I carried inside me, that no one had given me, that no one could take away. The rhythm was mine. It had always been mine. I sat under the palm tree. The oasis was dark. The pool reflected the stars. The desert was silent. And somewhere, very far away, or very close, I heard the sound I always heard at the end. A few notes, a piano maybe, or the wind moving through the palm fronds, or the rhythm of the last water dripping from the last leaf into the last pool in the last oasis. A few notes, then silence, then a few more notes, then I smiled. I closed my eyes. I let the desert hold me. I let the oasis hold me. I let the stars and the silence and the warm night air hold me. One more night, one more breath, one more silence. And then, whatever came next,